All right, welcome to CNS Connect webinar series. I am Amy Smith, the Certification Programs Coordinator at the ANA, and today I am joined by Dr. Camille Freeman to discuss how to use classes and webinars to build your practice. If you're a CNS, you can earn 1 CE for today's webinar, and I will put a survey in the chat at the end so you can get that certificate. As a reminder, this falls into the professional development category, and there's a maximum of 10 CE credits awarded each 5 years recertification period in that category. If you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to use the chat or the Q&A, and myself and Camille will keep an eye on that. And feel free to chat with your colleagues in that chat as well. So today I'm joined by Dr. Camille Freeman. She has been in practice as a registered herbalist and licensed nutritionist since 2003 with a focus on fertility and menstrual health. She runs Monday Mentoring, a community of practice for herbalists and nutritionists, and offers courses for highly trained herbalists and nutritionists who need help building and growing their practices. Camille is a professor at MUIH where she teaches physiology and pathophysiology. She holds a doctorate in clinical nutrition from MUIH, as well as a bachelor's in English from Rice University and a master's in herbal medicine from MUIH, and also has an MS in physiology and biophysics from Georgetown University. So thank you, Camille. We'll turn it over to you.
You are very welcome. I am going to set up my slides. And while I'm doing that, I would love it if y'all in the audience, could you put in the chat either if you've taught classes, what you like about them, or if you haven't taught classes in order to build your practice, why not? I would love to see that. And then I'm going to get my screen all set up and we will go from there. All right. So there we go. Okay. So here we go. I think you all can see, I think you all should be able to see my...
We can see your screen. Also, I apologize, everyone. The chat was off, but I just turned it back on.
Oh, good.
So now you can put your...
I was like, oh, it's a quiet bunch. It's a quiet bunch. That is okay. All right. So y'all get your thoughts together on what you like about teaching classes, or if you haven't done it, why you haven't done it yet. All right. So the purpose of today's workshop is to talk about how you can use classes and workshops specifically with the intent of growing your practice. So I want to be clear that I'm not talking today about having a course, an online course in order to enhance your income or things like that. I'm talking about single workshops offered in your community to potential clients with the idea that they would come in and start working with you individually. All right. So that's what we're doing here. And I'm Camille. This is the question that hopefully folks are answering in the chat right now. So what's hard about teaching a class, or what's stopping you from offering a class? Have there been any stumbling blocks in terms of navigating this and you finding your way? Just a little bit about why I might be specifically qualified to teach on this. I have been teaching for more than 15 years at the university level, in addition to being in clinical practice. And I have found that teaching to the community and offering workshops and things like that to the community, it can be an excellent way to become known in different spaces, to get clients and so forth. But the trick is you have to teach really well. The classes have to be really good. And most people's classes are not really good. And so they don't work very well. The other thing that happens with people is they will teach one class or two classes and be like, well, I didn't get any clients, so I'm going to try something else. You get into that circular pattern where you're like, I'm going to try a little thing and it didn't work. I'm going to try this. It didn't work. Try that. It didn't work. So the thing with the classes and the workshops is, A, you have to design them really well. B, you have to know a few key things about how to teach them so that you're enhancing your credibility and encouraging people to come work with you. And then you have to keep doing them. You can't just do one. You need to keep doing them regularly and consistently so that you can get better at them and so that people repeatedly can interact with your work. And that is what really helps. And if you don't do those things, you're not going to be able to use classes and workshops in order to build your practice. Okay. So let us carry on to our plan. First, we're going to talk about why you would want to consider them and also why anybody would want to come to one of your classes or workshops. We will go through finding a venue and picking a topic, what you should talk about, because this is where most people go very far astray. we're going to rein that in a little bit so you know how to design what you're going to talk about so that it actually works. And then we don't have time for a whole thing, but we'll do a couple of key tips about teaching well. And then I will also share some very important things about following up with people after the class and how you can make that work without it being kind of gross and being like, well, I too have a offering for you. It doesn't have to be weird and gross. There are ways to do it that work and that help people figure out if you're a good fit. Okay, so let's talk about motivations, both your motivation, why you want to offer classes, and the person's motivation who might come to your class, because this is a big part of things. So a lot of times people don't want to do classes and workshops because they feel like, oh, I'm going to have to be salesy. I'm going to have to kind of promote myself and tell them about why I'm so good. And it feels a little weird. Of course, there's also the fear of public speaking and all that kind of thing. However, I want to let you know that you don't have to heavily promote yourself outright during classes and workshops for them to work really well as a strategy for bringing in new clients. In order to get new clients from your classes and workshops, A, you need to do them consistently. I should have put that on the slide. But B, you want the people who come to your class to leave knowing what you do. And for a lot of us, nutritionist can mean a lot of different things. Not everybody knows what it would mean to work with a nutritionist or to work with you specifically. So you want them to understand what you do. You want them to leave with the impression that you are competent and that you know what you're doing. And you want them to remember these things when the time is right, either when they need your help or want your help, or when somebody they know needs or wants your help. So this last one, a key piece of it is you need to stay in touch with them, right? Because some people will come to your workshop. Let's say you do a workshop about sleep or something. They'll come, they're having trouble sleeping. They're like, hey, great, I want to sign up to work with you. Other people are like, oh, cool, I'm going to try some things, but I think I'm okay for right now. But maybe a month or two from now, they're going to be so frustrated with their sleep, they'll want to work with somebody, and they may or may not remember you unless you do some of the strategies we're going to talk about. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is why would anybody want to come to your class? So I want you to think about this. This is probably the most important question I'm going to ask you today. When you sign up for a webinar class, kind of like this one, or maybe you've been to some of the other CNS Connect webinars, or people who come to these things tend to like to go to trainings. So what makes something like this, a webinar, a class, something you go to, what makes it a big win where you're like, oh, I'm glad I went to that? I want you to think about this for real. You can put answers in the chat if you want, or write them down somewhere. I actually encourage you to kind of meditate on this, let it kind of trickle down for a couple of days and think about it. Like what would it mean for you to leave here and be like, oh, I'm so glad I came. Wouldn't have wanted to miss that. So yeah, learning something you didn't know, Andy, that is such a good one. Takeaways, pain points. Yes, these are all big ones. So think about that from your client's perspective. Why would they want to come to something that you're offering? One of the big, I don't want to say mistakes, but one of the big stumbling blocks that happens to a lot of people is they design a class where they're telling people a lot of things that they already know. Right. So if you're doing a class on sleep and you're going to be like, oh, we're going to talk about blue light and turning off your phone before bed and that kind of thing. Most people, if they're having insomnia, this is like the number one thing that's going to come up in Google when they're like, how do I sleep better? They've been told that 100 times. So it's not really a useful thing for them to come in and hear you talk about that for 5 or 10 minutes. Now, if you have a different strategy to share, if you have some idea for how they can actually do that, if they're like, it doesn't work for most people, here's why, and here's how you can change that, that's helpful. But you just kind of lecturing them about, oh, you should turn off your screens an hour before bed. They probably know that if you're designing a class on insomnia. So when you're thinking about your topic, which is our next topic right here, when you're thinking about your topic, I really want you to go into what is actually going to serve your client. They are not just going to want to come because they're so impressed by you. They don't know you yet. That's the whole point of these classes. All right. So we'll get into more about topics in just a moment here. First, this top question right up here. Who do you want to work with? All right. So you don't care about just anybody. I mean, you do care about most people, but when we're thinking about a class, we want to think about our clients. Are are clients that we really, really want to work with. So in this example, maybe we love working with people who have insomnia, and we feel like if we can just change people's sleep, we can change their lives. All right. So then we start to think about, what do they care about? We start to think about, what are the questions we get asked most commonly from our clients, or what are the things that they don't know already when they come to work with us that we wish they knew? Or what are the first steps that pretty much anybody can do safely? Just start to think about those types of things. When you are doing this, I want you to brainstorm at least 10 or 20 ideas for topics. Do not just come up with the first one and then be like, oh, great, I'm going to design a class here. At least 10 or 20 topics. You want to get to where you're like digging at the bottom of the barrel for topics. Okay. Because what happens is, at the bottom of the barrel there, sometimes you come up with some really cool ideas. The more specific your topic is, the better. So you are going to have more people who would sign up for, this is counterintuitive, but it's true. You're going to have more people who would sign up for a class. Let's just say you were doing a class on, for people who have nightmares and really scary dreams, versus a class on healthy sleep. Let me tell you that the people who have nightmares and really scary dreams are going to be all over a class about that. And then you can get really, really into things that might really help them. You can do a class on healthy sleep, but it's going to be better if you're like something along the lines of, this is a class for moms of kids who don't sleep well, and thus they don't sleep well, or something along those lines, where somebody could read the title and be like, oh, that's me. Right? So healthy sleep, nobody's going to be like, that's me, I'm healthy sleep. You want something that really describes and gets to the heart of what you're going to talk about and who you're going to work with. The more specific you are, the easier it is for people to sign up. Also, when you are coming up with the title of your class, clear is better than clever. Make it obvious from the title what will be happening in the class. So I should be able to glance at the title and know, is this a good fit for me or not? I shouldn't need to read the whole page and figure out who is this for and what's happening here. Should be very, very obvious from the title. Again, this is going to take some brainstorming. I have on the resources page, which I will share with you. I think I shared it on the first slide, but I have a resources page, and I actually have a guide towards creating a class. It's just a Google Doc that you could transport into your own Google Drive, and kind of walks you through some of these steps. All right. So my recommendation is that you get your title first, your topic, your general topic first, and then wait to come up with the title until the very end of your planning process, which we will talk more about later. Okay. Now, venues. You have an idea. Now you're going to think about where you're going to do it. If you are doing this class for the purpose of building your practice, I recommend that you don't do it on your own. Borrow somebody else's audience. Okay. So do it at one of these places or something similar. I'm not going to read them out loud to you, but think about, where do you have connections in your community, and where are your people going to be? So if you, for example, focus on healthy aging, you're not going to find a ton of clients in the Girl Scouts troop doing your local Girl Scout thing. You want to really think about where most of your people are going to be, and see if you can get some speaking opportunities in those places. Again, you're probably going to have to contact several of them before you find some takers, and that's okay. It's totally normal to just kind of reach out, make connections, see what they have going on. The biggest hint I have for you here is look at these places' events and see, have they ever offered events that are something in the range of an hour that seem like they are community focused? If they have, there's a good chance that they would be open to hosting yours as well. If they haven't ever done anything like that, that's going to be an uphill battle, probably not the best use of your time when you're just starting out. Once you have a better kind of recognition in the community, that may be something you want to breach. But for right now, go with places that already have programs set up where people are coming in and doing short classes or workshops. These are some of the best ones that I have seen working for people I am mentoring. All right. So again, depending on what you offer and what's available locally, a lot of these you can do them online, or you can do them in person. So it just depends on where your people are that you want to work with. All right. So you've got your topic, you've got your venue. Now we get into the planning of the actual class. And this is the most important part. Okay. So what are you going to do to start out with? I'll tell you what you're not going to do. You are not going to start with your slides. You don't say, okay, I've got my topic up. Let me open up PowerPoint or Google Slides. No, do not do that. That's the easiest way to have this whole thing not work out very well. So what I want you to do is start with 3 learning outcomes. Okay, 3 things. If you have an hour, if you have a full day or a half day, maybe you can have some more. But if you have just an hour or 45 minutes, something like that, 3 things that you want them to walk away with. And you should be able to summarize them in like a sentence. Okay, 3 things. These should be good things. They should be things that you didn't already know when you started, like Andy said in the chat there. 3 things that the average person coming to your talk would be helpful for them. Okay, it might not even be things they know. It might be a skill that you're teaching them or something along those lines, but only 3. Big mistake that a lot of people make when they're teaching classes is I'm going to tell you everything that I know about this, and I'm going to cram in lots of information and make it valuable. No, that's too much for people and it doesn't work. Okay, there are ways you're going to make yourself, not make yourself, but you're going to promote your work and help people see that you are an expert in this subject, that you have credibility and so forth, but it is not by cramming in tons of information. 3, y'all, 3, hear me. I know you're not going to do it, but I'm still telling you 3. So make an outline. You have your 3 things. This is all in the handout that I have for you. So you're going to have learning objective number 1. Then you're going to think, what's the best way to teach this? Sometimes it's to talk to people like right here. If we had a whole half day, we could probably work on this together. We could workshop it and share ideas and peer review and things like that, but we only have an hour. But sometimes it's about demonstration. Sometimes you're bringing in herbs and spices and you're going to show them rather than tell them. But think about what is the best way that I can help people understand or know or experience this. So go ahead and kind of frame out how you want to get this point across. And think about in advance stories or examples from your clinical practice that apply. It can be short. It can be 1 sentence. So for example, if we're going on the sleep theme, I had a client take my mindful eating class, a student take my mindful eating class at MUIH maybe last year or the year before. And she changed nothing else. She'd had insomnia for decades. And all she did was start eating at regular times. And she found a 90% improvement in her sleep. Okay, that is a clinical story that shows the significance. Now, if I were really trying to get clients to come in to work with me for insomnia, I would probably fancy it up a little bit. I would share more about our journey and that sort of thing. But just even a little snippet like that, where you're demonstrating by story that you have clients, you're going to want several times in your class to say, I had a client when I was working with someone who we will call, Jane or whatever. You're just going to weave it into the conversation that you work with clients 1-to-1. And ideally, you're going to weave in some really good shifts that you were able to make with people, some good outcomes that people had, or some of the meaning that people found in your work together by story. Okay, so maybe 1 that relates to each of your key learning objectives. You're not going to be like, and so you should come work with me. You're just going to weave it in there, a story that highlights the kind of work you do. Okay. Also, for each of your key learning objectives, I want you to plan at least 1 thing that involves audience interaction. Okay. So this could be as simple as raise your hand if you, consistently wake up early versus consistently wake up in the middle of the night and can't go back to sleep. Like if you have trouble falling asleep, wake up in the middle of the night or wake up too early, and have people raise their hand. Just something like that counts as audience interaction. Or you could have them do something like, you're going to pass around the lavender oil, or you're going to have them make their own custom herbal tea, or you're going to have them pair up together and look at a sleep diary, or whatever would help you illustrate or engage them with the learning objective. So 1 small plan, depending on how much time you have and what the group is going to be like, this may differ. Again, this is really important because you want them to come away with a feeling of connection and community. And if you're just talking at people the whole time and you're acting like you're speaking to an audience of 500 when there's 5 people in the group, it's not a great impression. So you want to have some time where they are interacting with you and potentially, ideally, with other people in the group. Okay, so plan that in advance. Don't just spur of the moment do it. Also write down the timing for each section. So you have 3 learning outcomes. Maybe you want to spend 10 to 15 minutes on each. You've got a minute or 2 to intro, a minute or 2 to wrap up, and then some time for questions. Your question time is your buffer time. Key thing is you always end on time. So if you do Q&A at the end, then you can make it 2 minutes or you can make it 15 minutes and you've got a little bit of wiggle room depending on what happens. Okay. Now, takeaway points here. Focus on what the audience wants to hear or would be helpful for them, not what you want to share. Okay. So you're going to want to add in all kinds of studies and, blah, blah, blah. They probably don't want to hear about that. Maybe they do, depending on who you're talking to, but really they want to know, what can I use? What is going to help me feel better? What's going to be interesting about this topic to me that's implementable, something I didn't know already? So focus on that and keep it simple. Avoid overpacking. Leave breathing room so that people can actually connect, that there's time for questions. And again, I'm going to say it again, use those stories, use the clinical examples, because that is the key part of having people think of you as a clinician, as somebody who helps and understanding the work you do. It's so much better to show them in this way versus telling them, I'm a nutritionist with 17 years of experience and I work with people who have insomnia. Just show them the kinds of results that you get by illustrating it with stories and examples. Okay, so once you have your outline, you do an intro. You don't need a big intro. You don't need to tell them every degree you've ever gotten, just a minute or two with an emphasis on whatever you're teaching about. So in the insomnia example, you say like, oh, I'm Camille Freeman. I've been in practice for 15 years. I've worked with hundreds of clients who have insomnia, and my passion is helping people get better sleep, because when you sleep better, everything in your life is better. And then just go on. I don't need to tell them all my degrees, blah, blah, blah. They can read about that later, but I've established credibility and authority. I'm assuming it, and I'm going right to the stuff that's going to help them. Okay. On your first slide, we'll get to slides in a minute, but on your first slide, you do have your contact info and your last one. The outro, review takeaways. And this is key. Okay. So again, major point here. Let them know that you're going to follow up with an email tomorrow, and then let them know why they would want to open the email. And this third part is why, because you are going to send them a resource or something related to this class that they want. So in the sleep example, maybe you say, oh, I'm going to send you 3 of my favorite herbal teas that really help with sleep. I'm going to send you those recipes as well as where you can buy the herbs tomorrow. So keep an eye out for an email from me. This is incredibly important that you have a way to connect with them. So either during the registration process, you get people's emails, or have them sign in and provide their email address so that you can contact them later. All right. I cannot emphasize the importance of this enough if you are using this class to build your practice. You really, really need to do this one follow-up email the next day, and you need to give them a reason to open it. So maybe if it's a recording like this, you're going to send out the recording, but you also want to send out something else that they really would like to have, because if they were there for the whole thing, why would they need the recording? Maybe they want to review it, but probably they want for some other reason, they want to see something. So maybe you're going to share some recipes or a resource list of, 12 meditations that really help people, or your favorite protein-rich breakfasts, or whatever, something like that, where they're going to be like, yeah, that would be really helpful for me to have that. Okay. So that's what you're going to, and you're not going to be heavy-handed with it. You're just going to say, thank you so much for being here. Here's my contact info. I will be sending you an email tomorrow with whatever it is you're going to be sending them. Okay. All right. Slides. Don't use slides if it's just going to be you and a few people at the library. It's more trouble than it's worth. Just talk. You can have note cards. You can have yourself a little outline, something like that. If it's going to be a larger venue, more people, that sort of thing, you can or if there's a really good reason that you need to illustrate things, slides are okay. And I'll share some tips about the slides right here, but don't feel like you have to have slides. In fact, you're going to have a better connection with the audience, which means more people are potentially going to want to work with you one-on-one if you don't have slides, because then it's just you having a guided conversation with the people you're talking to. So I have found that more people will come and make that leap to work with me if I don't have the slides. Okay, so However, I know lots of people like slides, so I'm going to share just a few tips about slides here. Simple. You should spend 30 minutes, maybe an hour on your slides. Notice I didn't say a week or 10 days, anything like that. Once you've got your outline and you already know, oh, here is the interaction that I'm going to do. Here are the 3 main points. Here are the takeaway points. Your slides are basically written. All you're going to do is put the basics together and you're done. Maybe you can do some very, very light branding, like if you want to use the colors of your business or put your little logo on there or something like that. Great, but it doesn't need to be fancy. You don't need tons of images unless they are specifically illustrating a point that you're making. If you're like, oh, it's just a pretty flower. No, you don't need it. Take it off. If you need the image for a reason, great. If it's setting a mood, that kind of thing, okay. But you don't need to have an image on every slide. You don't need lots of text. You don't need to, please don't read your slides out loud. That is one very quick way to disconnect. And that's not what you're trying to do. Remember, you're trying to connect with people so they can get a feel for your healing presence and feel connected to you enough to want to come and share some of what they've been going through with you and get your help. And then if you're ever in doubt that somebody can't read something on your slide, make it bigger or take it out. All right, these are my tips for slides. All right, so what do you put on there? First and last slides have your contact info. The first slide will probably be up when people walk in the room, and then the last slide will be up during your Q&A and that kind of thing. So people will have time to take a picture, write it down, whatever they want to do. If you need images to illustrate your point, for example, maybe you're showing them the difference between one type of skull cap and the other type of skull cap, or, baked kale versus sauteed kale or whatever it is. Great, have some images. If you're having them do an activity of any sort, put the instructions on the slide and leave it up. So if you're saying, oh, I turn to your neighbor and share how your night of sleep was last night, put it up on the slide because inevitably they will forget. even something that simple, people are like, oh, I wasn't listening. Put a big slide, leave it up for the duration of the exercise. And then have summaries of key points, the takeaway things. That's pretty much all you need on the slides. A big question I get a lot is how many slides? And my recommendation is a max of 1 slide for every 2 to 5 minutes. So to give you an idea, this presentation is, I believe, an hour, and I have 25 slides, and I have more than I need. We'll probably go for another 10, 15 minutes and then have time for questions. And some of these slides are extraneous. Okay. I will tell you a little vignette about the worst presentation I've ever been to. It was at a nutrition conference, not the ANA conference. It was a long time ago. So this is not recent, but I was very interested in the topic. I wanted to know about it. It was for practitioners. I went sitting in the audience, and the presenter comes up and starts going through the slides. I think it's a 45-minute or an hour long presentation. And this person had, it was like 175 slides or something like that. And it was and each one had, they would have graphs and 3 or 4 points and the citations. And it was just, I might as well have just gone and taken a nap or read a book or something, because I didn't remember anything from any of it. I just felt anxious the whole time about the next slide. Like I couldn't even read one slide before we were on the next slide. Okay. So you need to have time for people to digest what's there. And the more stuff is on your slides, the less they are looking at and engaging with you. And what you're doing here, again, is building connection with your community. And so we don't want complicated and dense slides. We want simple, helpful slides for people to focus on if you need slides at all, which you may or may not. Okay. Practice your presentation before you do it, so you know about the timing, and you're supposed to have an hour, and you just did the whole thing in 20 minutes, and now you have 40 very awkward minutes. Okay. So, or conversely, this is an hour and a half long presentation and you're trying to squeeze in an hour, you got to take some stuff out. Right. So practice first, do at least one full run through, not just in your head, but saying the words out loud so that you can get a sense of your timing. Okay. A couple tips for teaching. Does anybody have any thoughts or comments on that before I go into just a couple of teaching tips? This could be a whole class on just teaching tips, but are we doing okay? Are people basically following along here? I assume y'all are doing okay. So let's go into our teaching tips. Okay, get there 15 minutes early. This is really important for practice building because I want you to register people if they haven't signed up in advance, or if they have signed up in advance, I want you to check them off so that you can remember their names, because they might say, oh, my name's Jenny. And then 5 minutes later, you're like, was it Jennifer, Jen, Jenny, Josephine? You're not going to remember. So if you have it written down, you can gradually look at your little list and be like, oh yes, Jenny, or whatever it is. And then also, like I said before, get their contact information, please. Okay. So you're going to get there 15 minutes early. You're going to set up, and then instead of sitting there awkwardly behind your desk or at the podium, go and interact with the people. Mingle with the people. This is so important. Again, you're building connection, but also I want you to ask them, hey, what brought you here tonight? Or what questions do you have about this topic? What made you sign up to come here? What are you looking forward to learning about tonight? Because sometimes, or today, whenever you're doing it, because sometimes you will learn some really interesting things about, oh, this part of this, the title of this talk really resonated with me, or I wanted to really learn more about this thing, and you hadn't planned to cover it, but you can squeeze it in somewhere, or you can do it in the Q&A. Also, it gives you a chance to make that one-on-one connection with people, and they are then more likely to remember you when they need you, and also to feel a connection with you, to feel comfortable reaching out to you if and when they need your help. Okay, so really use that time before to strike up conversation. So have a few conversation starters. Those ones I just gave you are gold in terms of getting to know folks. Do bring something that is ideally not your phone to keep time. This is true whether you're doing online or in person, that you cannot always see the time. So have some kind of clock, timer, watch, something else that's not your phone to look at the time. It's just distracting for other people. If you start looking at your phone, they're like, oh yeah, I should look at my phone. So try not to model that behavior for people who are there. Also, water and a cough drop, because you will inevitably have a coughing fit at some point during your presentation if you do not bring one. So you got to bring one just in case. Even if people look sort of assume positive intent. I one time taught a webinar for the American Herbalist Guild that had, 50 or 60 people there, and not one person ever the entire time posted in the chat. And I was like, I was so disconcerted. I was like, I don't know what's going on. Maybe this isn't what they were hoping. I had all these stories in my head about how horrible of a job I was doing. And afterwards, I got tons and tons of people contacting me and be like, oh, I love the presentation. They was just a quiet bunch. So try not to assume based on people's behavior or appearance what they are thinking or how they are receiving your information. Just assume interest and positive intent until you are proven otherwise. Okay. Watch the stories that are happening in your head, and take some time to set your focus and intention before you start, and go from there. All right. So first, hardest part is getting started. Smile, tell people that you're excited to be there, make eye contact with a few people, and let them know at the beginning when you're going to answer questions. At the end is when you're going to do it. Okay. Again, that helps people know not to interrupt you unless you like being interrupted. I don't recommend that when you're just starting out, because can really derail the conversation and throw you off your game. So just let people know in advance. We'll have some time for questions at the end. Do not give them a specific amount of time, because again, you need that buffer. So if you go really fast, you have a lot of time for questions. If you go really, if you're going over time, you might have just a few minutes. So don't say we'll have 15 minutes. Just say we'll have time for questions at the end. Right? Okay. So remember, after the presentation, when you wrap it up, please, please, please say, you don't have to say, and now if you would like to work with me, here is how you can set up your initial visit. In fact, I recommend that you do not say that. It just feels like a weird pressure-filled way, like it, people sort of feel like, oh, the whole point of this was just to get me to sign up for something, versus the point of this is to share with your community things that are actually helpful and start to become known in your community as somebody who is an expert in whatever it is that you do. Okay. So you certainly can, if you're giving a class on insomnia and you specifically work with insomnia, you can certainly say, if some of the tips and strategies we have shared here tonight aren't working for you, I do work with people one-on-one. Love to talk to you about it. Contact me anytime. That's as much as I would do in terms of self-promotion actively. But do use the strategy I told you about saying, I'll be in touch tomorrow to share something related to your presentation. Okay. The other things that I really hope that you will do are, number one, reflect on what happened at the session. Again, in the worksheet that I have for you, there's a section there where I kind of write down all the things I think you should make a note of. You think you're going to remember it forever. And I promise you, a year from now, you'll be like, oh, I don't remember. Where was that workshop? What date was it? Who came? So I want you to write down, like, how many people registered versus how many people came? What went well? Did you take too long? Did you have to cut something out? Did people ask questions? Their questions are actually gold. Really recommend that you write down any questions that people have, because A, that might be a good topic for another workshop if a bunch of people seemed interested. B, it's a great topic for social media, blogs, any kind of content creation that you're doing because people are interested. And C, you might want to work it into the workshop the next time you do it. Okay. So write all that down, keep track of any reflections that you had on, oh, I was a little uncomfortable on this, or I need to change up slide 4 because nobody could see it, whatever happened, write it down so that the next time you teach this workshop, you can iterate. Thank the organizers. If you are borrowing someone else's audience, like you're doing a workshop at the YMCA or whatever, I think it's really nice to send a card in the mail. Sometimes I will send a pack of seeds or a little pencil or something like that, just to thank the organizer, because they do put in a lot of time, and it's really nice of them to host you. So I always like to do that. I think it helps make it more likely that they would be willing to have you again. And then your follow-up email, which we have already talked about. Okay. Don't forget the follow-up email, because in the follow-up email, you're going to share the thing. You can also say something in your follow-up email about how to stay in touch. So you can say things like, oh, if you want to know about the next workshop I'm teaching, here's how you can sign up for my email newsletter, or how you can follow me on Instagram, or whatever is the thing that is the best way for them to keep in touch with you. That is what you want them to do. So your goal in your head is, I would love for everybody who's here, or half the people who are here, or most of the people who are here, to sign up for your newsletter or to follow you on Instagram. The goal is not to have most of those people. I mean, obviously it'd be nice if most of those people came to work with you, but they aren't all going to want or need to work with you right then. But what you really want to do is have a way to stay in touch with them. Because remember that third thing that I told you about, how we want people to know that we're available when and if they need us, or someone they know needs us. And coming to one single class or workshop doesn't do that. What does help with that is a really good workshop, plus you pop up periodically in their minds, meaning, oh, you posted on Instagram and they saw that post and was really cool. Or they get an email from you once a week or once a month, and they're like, oh yeah, that person, great with insomnia. I think, Karen down the road just told me they had insomnia. So why don't I connect the two of them? You need to have some way to come to the top of their mind periodically. This is not an immediate solution to getting new clients, but it is a good, solid, long-term solution. People will remember you if you have a really great experience with your class and they hear from you periodically. Okay, so you've got to do that follow-up. In the follow-up email, you can also say something along the lines of what I said before. Oh, if you continue struggling with insomnia after you try these tips, here's how you can schedule a one-to-one visit. Don't lay it on heavy, but just let them know that you're available one-to-one. Sometimes you can say things like, I've got 2 more openings in September. Feel free to contact me if you want to talk more about it, or something like that. Okay. All right. So that is what I have for you here. I wanted to leave plenty of time for your questions. So I'm going to recap And then if you have any questions, if you want to share scenarios, if anyone wants to share some ideas or troubleshoot, we have time. The things that I want you to take away from this are focus on serving the person who's there. The class is not about you, it's about them. What can they get? How can it be a really good experience for them? That is how they're going to start thinking of you as an expert. You want to build in that interaction. You want to highlight your clinical work. Okay, so highlight your clinical work and the kind of wins that your clients have had as you go through things. Give them a reason to expect an email from you the next day. So when they see it, they're like, oh yeah, I want to open that. That's good. And then keep presenting. As I said in the beginning, your first presentation may not, it may not go well, and that's okay. You need to just keep doing this. If this is a strategy you're using to build your practice, you want to try to schedule one a month. Okay, schedule one a month. Don't know where to do it? Start thinking about where would you try? Where should you try? Okay, the more times you do this, the more effective it's going to be. And the more your name is going to be out there as, oh, this is the person, the go-to person for this. Okay. So this is the page where you can get, I have a copy of the slides here, but also that worksheet that I was talking about. If you want just to kind of go through each of the steps, you can get it there. And now I am happy to do some questions or troubleshooting or whatever else I can help you with along these lines. So does anybody have a comment or a question that they would like to mull over with me or the rest of the group?
And if anybody wants to raise their hand, I can also unmute them so that they don't have to chat. Type it in the chat.
Let's see. We may not have any folks who have questions. Okay, so if nobody has questions, this is what I would really love to see. If you have a workshop idea, could you share the topic of it in the chat? And we could, if you want some feedback on it, we could think through whether you might want to be a little bit more specific or whether it's clear who might come to it. So if anybody wants to share a topic idea, feel free to put that in the chat. Okay, Andy, resistant weight loss. Let's see here. So that one, you might need to be a little bit more specific. So is the idea that people would come to the workshop if they were trying to lose weight and nothing was working for them? If that's the case, then I might say that. Like weight loss strategies when you've tried everything and nothing's working. Like that's the sort of thing where it's like, oh, if I was talking to my sister or my good friend and I was saying, oh, here's the problem I'm having, you want something in that language. So try to make it like super, super clear as much as you can. But I think that's a compelling topic because some people are not in that phase and other people are like, oh yeah, that's me. Ada, could I repeat some of the pre-presentation questions and conversations? Yes. So essentially the things that I try to ask them about are like, oh, what made you sign up for this training or webinar or class or something like that? Because it gives you, first of all, it gives you some feedback on the title, because sometimes they'll be like, oh, I saw the title and I was like, oh, that's me. And then you're like, oh, yes, good. It's resonating with people. Or sometimes you'll get a little bit of their story, which is also really helpful, that kind of thing. So I just try to ask them like, what brought you here tonight? Or what are you hoping to, is there anything you were really hoping that we would cover? Those types of things. If you're doing a webinar, you can get a little bit more creative, but that's a good one. Dana, yeah. So when you feel like the whole class or workshop is a sales pitch, it really is off-putting. So that's why I think it's so important to emphasize that people who come should feel like they leave and they're like, wow, I'm really glad I went to that. Not like, oh, now I know who to go to for my, weight loss needs or what have you. You want them to feel like, oh, it's a complete helpful thing in and of itself. They don't need to go on to part 2 if they want some kind of benefit or help. I also went to another workshop at a different conference, also not the ANA, where it was about thyroid, supporting people with thyroid problems, and which I was like, oh, they had a framework, and it was like an hour long. And then they got to the end and it was like, oh, and if you want to know our actual thyroid framework, you can pay for a $700 practitioner program. I was like, why did I just come to this for an hour at a conference I paid for? So Jenny, cancer prevention and oncology nutrition, I think that's going to be too broad. So you want to think about to yourself, like, okay, there's 2 sets of people. One set of people might be interested in preventing cancer. That's a tricky one though, because it's like high blood pressure, where it's like, well, if you don't have it yet, it's not at the top of people's minds. And so it's sort of like, but there are some groups who are particularly interested in cancer prevention, such as people who have a close family member who has cancer or died of cancer or something like that, or people who are at high risk for X, Y, and Z reasons. So you might want to stratify to that, to say, like using using dietary strategies to prevent cancer, when you have a first degree relative. Like, you can get pretty long and specific in your title, as long as people look at it and they're like, oh yeah, that's been a problem for me, I'd like to sign up. Oncology nutrition is kind of a whole separate set of people, because most of those folks are either they have cancer or they had cancer, and now they're looking like, what should I eat? So you could do something like, what to eat when you have cancer, or something along those lines. And again, that's very clear. It helps people to understand. One thing I'm saying here is try to put it in layperson's terms as much as you can. So if it sounds like it could be the name of a textbook, to put it aside and see if you can get it a little bit more friendly sounding, so people are like, oh yeah, okay. Karen, your get up and go, got up and went. What can we do about it? Yeah, so I think that's a good title, although it's not clear what it's about. So like, this could be an exercise class or a meditation class, or I don't really know what I'm getting into there. So it might be like your get up and go, got up and went, nutrition strategies for when your energy is down, or something like that, or whatever strategies you're teaching, because I actually don't know. Yes, Stephanie. Okay, so Stephanie has a great point here. Trying to put together a 1-hour community class, but there's so much information. Picking 3 key points to narrow it down is hard. Yes, so you don't want to try to sum up all of mindful eating in 1 hour. that's really hard. But what you may want to do is something like, 3 mindful eating practices, or 3 mindful eating practices for beginners, or something. And so the idea is, okay, we're going to learn in the course of 1 hour 3 easy mindful eating strategies for beginners that you can use for the rest of your life. And then, of course, the idea is, if you need extra help, you can come in and work with me. So you're not even, in that case, I would just go with something that is practical. You don't even need to get into all the theory of mindful eating, just to teach people 3, maybe the raisin exercise, or maybe 1 or 2 breathing exercises, or something like that, where it's like, okay, even if they don't know anything else, they can try those 3 things and really get a good start on it. So those are some things here. Okay. Oh, Celia, I'm so glad that you brought this up. Worrying about giving away too much information for free. Okay. This is a very, very common thing. And you know what? I promise you that there is no amount of information that you could give away that's too much for free, unless you are specifically being like, everyone should be taking 500 milligrams of curcumin, something where it's like not really applicable to everyone. But even when you are basically giving people your entire strategy that you use with all of your clients, there are variations and nuances that apply to individual people. And the more they get the feel that you are the expert, the more they want to know, how can I do this for me specifically, because I'm a vegetarian, or I have kids and they can't eat, blah, blah, blah. We have food allergies, all these things start to layer on top. So do not give them the valuable stuff, give them the good stuff in your presentation. And I promise you, it will not drive people away. I know it's really hard to think that that's true. And it really, really is. In fact, a lot of the mentoring work I do, it's stuff that is on my websites everywhere. Like it's anywhere online. You could get the basics, but people want somebody who can talk to them about their particular situation and who could check in on them and be like, are you actually doing the thing? Because that's more important than the things. It's doing the things. So it's not really about the content. It's about the expertise that you have, the individualization that you can do, and their unique situation. So just like, give people the good stuff. And yes, the information overwhelm is hard. Stephanie has a great question here. Do I recommend charging for these classes or workshops, or should they be free? It depends a little bit on your particular clientele and your goals. It might also depend on the venue. Some of these only offer free, some of these only offer paid. So it depends, I would get a sense for whatever else has been offered at the venue and go along with that. So if they mostly offer free offerings like at the library or something like that, just offer it for free. And if it's something like the YMCA and they usually charge $25 for a class like this, then just go with that. I find that people, if you offer it for pay, if there's some kind of charge associated, you will have more people who registered sign up. Like most people who register will come if they paid, but you won't have as many people. Something is free, a lot of them will register. Many, more than 50% probably, won't actually attend. However, you've got more people total, and then you can send the people who didn't come an email and say, hey, missed you last night at the blah, blah, blah. I wanted to make sure you had a copy of the recording or had a copy of the resource sheet. Love to answer any questions you have about blah, blah, blah. Reach out anytime. Here's my contact info. Okay, so even if people don't come to the workshop, webinar, whatever it is, you can still have that connection with them and ideally invite them to follow you, sign up for the thing, do whatever they want to do. Okay. For me, as a strategy to bring people into my practice, I like to do them for free. I also think of it as a community service. So, a lot of us have pretty pricey offerings in order to just financially make ends meet for ourselves. There's a cost to running a business and insurance. I don't have to tell you all, this. So it's pretty pricey to come work with us. And so I actually really do think of my classes as a way for people to get support and help from me, either for free or very low cost as a kind of a service offering, is same as with my email list and things like that. Like I can help people at scale who may or may not be able to come in and afford to work with me. So I mostly have them free or very, very low cost, and that sort of thing. The other thing is, if you teach really good workshops and people have been to one or they've heard about them and they know they're pretty valuable, they want to come. So if word gets around that your free workshop is really, really good, people will attend. One last piece of advice that I didn't squeeze into this, again, I'm trying not to overwhelm people, but I will say, since it just kind of sprang to mind right now, is that if you're having an in-person workshop or class, I really recommend not lecturing the whole time, because especially these days where people haven't been gathering all of that much over the last couple of years, like take advantage of your time together, do something that you couldn't do online. So whether that is pairing up with people or some kind of group activity, or you're making something together, you're getting your hands dirty with the herbs, or you're smelling turmeric, or you're cutting up apples and making peanut butter apple nachos or whatever, do something that's hands-on that you really couldn't do in person and or couldn't do online, and make that experience special. Because again, people have a good memory associated with you. You come across as skillful and so forth, then that's going to elevate you to the level of expertise, somebody I'd like to connect with, somebody I'd like to work with, and somebody that I remember when it's time, right? So that's what you're going for. Any other questions? Such great ideas. I don't think I missed any, but I may have. Let me just scroll back through these chats to see if I don't think I missed any. All right. So thank you all so much for being here. It was really fun to spend an hour with you. If you have any questions, my contact info is on my website. You can pop over there anytime. Love to hear if you're doing a webinar or a class. Let me know how it went. I'd like to hear if you use any of these tips. They do work. It's just a matter of implementing them. So, all right.
Jenny raised her hand, so I'm going to see what she has to say here. Let me unmute you, Jenny. Okay, you should be able to talk.
Yeah.
Hey, Jenny.
Oh, hi. Yeah, I find it really, really helpful, the information you shared and tips. So I've been in practice for 7 years, and when I just started, I did host a ton of in-person workshops in the local community. So what I found was it was quite exhausting, especially if I had to do it every month. It's just a lot of material. It's just a lot of preparations every time. And then the outcome from doing all of that was there were not a lot of people who signed up. It really depends. Sometimes, I could get a bigger crowd, sometimes very small. And also the conversion rate from converting these people into one-on-one clients were not really good. So after a while, I just kind of quit doing it. So my question for you is, I think the downside of doing the in-person workshop is that you could only reach these many people, right? A lot of times it can be very small. But then I was thinking of doing it online. Maybe this is kind of beyond the topic we're talking about, but if you do online, you can reach a lot more people. So it's almost, to me, I felt the in-person workshop is not as sustainable in a way, especially if you change the topic every time, you talk about different things every month. So it just takes a lot of preparation, right? So I just wonder if there's if I do want to go back to do the in-person workshop, if there are any tips to make the process a little more simple, so I don't feel like my energy is being drained, with this huge amount of work I have to do just to get it all together.
Yeah. So just a couple of things. Great questions. First of all, everything here will work for online or face-to-face. So no matter what kind of class you're doing, you have to just adjust a little bit for online in terms of like showing up 15 minutes early.
I totally agree. I have already I was thinking about that. A lot of things you shared can be applied online. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah. So absolutely. If online works for you, great. But a couple of things I would think about are, first of all, do the end of class evaluation that I have on my worksheet here, because you're going to want to get feedback, as much feedback as you can from participants about like, oh, which ones are people coming to? What are they interested in? What's fun and easy for me? So if you're feeling drained and you're like, oh, this is a lot of work, think about what's easy and fun that people might be interested in. So if it's a lot of work for you to come up with a whole presentation on insulin resistance and, blah, 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 I don't know what your presentations were about, but if they're a lot of work, then think to yourself like, oh, would it be easy and fun for me to just go on a grocery store tour or to talk about like green tea, black tea, and I don't know, red tea, rooibos or something? Like what would be simple and possibly useful for people and fun? And try some of those things, because it shouldn't feel like a huge burden to you. The first couple, it might take a while to go through this process and make your outline and so forth. You can reuse them if you go to different venues, especially if you're doing online. But a lot of us need to experiment a little bit to find that sweet spot of where it's fun for us and fun for our participants. Like it's information that the participants want, and it's easy or easy-ish for us. And so, of course, the more experience you have, like think about what are the common questions or concerns or things that come up for my clients, and can I create a workshop on that so that they get a leg up before they start working with me? So, if you find that 80% of the people coming to your practice are dehydrated, how can you create a fun workshop on hydration so that it's something you do all the time, you've got the information, it's not hard, and then it's also leading really well into working with you, gives them that extra boost and so forth. So that's what I would do. I first of all try to make your topics more specific. That's easier to prepare than a huge, broad, insulin resistance. Bye, Bruce. Thanks for being here. So make your topics more specific, make them fun for you, and do the feedback on the form that talks about evaluating each one you do so they can figure out what people like, what you like, and so forth. Also, the other thing I will say is that these workshops aren't for everybody. So some people, this is like a core piece of their practice. This is how they get their clients. And other people, they have a referral-based practice and they don't need or want, this isn't public speaking, isn't their thing, and so forth. By Andy. So anyway, I'll stop there because I know we're a little bit over time, but those are my quick suggestions.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you so much, Camille. And I put the CE survey in the chat and also the link to sign up for the webinars we have coming up for the rest of the month and the rest of the year. We are also looking for CNSs to present their expertise next year. So if you are a CNS who has an expertise on a professional development topic, please feel free to reach out to me by email and we will see if we can get you on the schedule for next year. Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon. Thank you, Camille.
Bye.
Bye.